He carried ice, lived in poverty, and dreamed of wealth. The incredible story of Rit, who defied fate, crushed hardship, and became a magnate everyone will talk about. The boy named Rit was carrying heavy blocks of ice along a narrow dusty street. The cold burned his hands, but he gritted his teeth and walked silently forward. Suddenly a sharp whistle and an impatient car horn sounded behind him. From surprise he flinched and almost dropped his load. A luxurious shiny car stopped behind him and a young man in an expensive suit was at the wheel. He honked again irritably, ordering him to move aside. Rit turned and saw the smirk on his face. Next to the rich man sat his friend, who laughed loudly. Their laughter was sharp and humiliating. They were the same age but seemed from different worlds, one in silk and gold, the other in a worn shirt with a heavy load on his shoulders. A flash of indignation and bitterness ignited in Rit's chest. Why does one have everything and the other only exhausting work? He slowly stepped aside, but his eyes burned. The car rushed away, leaving dust and the smell of gasoline. On the ground near the sidewalk, Rit noticed a crumpled newspaper. The wind flipped a page and his gaze stopped on an article about Andrew Carnegie. It told how a boy without education and wealth started with the hardest work but through persistence became a magnate. Rit's heart beat faster and something new awoke in his soul. He tightly clenched the newspaper in his hands and silently vowed that one day he would rise so high that no one would look down on him again. When Rit returned home after a long and exhausting day, he was met by the silence of the poorhouse. On the table there was only a bowl with cold leftovers and a stale piece of bread. From the bed near the window came a dull, strained cough of his mother, and this sound gripped his heart more than any insult. He sat next to her and saw how pale she had grown compared to yesterday. Her hands trembled and her eyes had lost their shine. Rit quietly asked his father why they didn't buy medicine, but he only sighed heavily and replied that there was no money and he was powerless to change anything. These words hit the boy like a slap. In his chest a storm of anger and despair boiled up. He pulled out the newspaper from his pocket and unfolded it before his father. Showing the article about Carnegie, Rit passionately said that he would also become rich and save his mother with the best doctors, but in response he only heard bitter laughter and cold conviction that such dreams were not for their family. His father shook his head and said the son would never be rich because their fate was to work to exhaustion and count pennies. Rit silently looked at his younger brothers and sisters huddled in the corner, and something broke inside him. His faith in the support of his family crumbled like fragile ice underfoot. That night he could not sleep for a long time, listening to his mother's cough and his father's heavy breathing. The darkness seemed thick and hopeless, but inside him a quiet, stubborn fire of determination to change his fate at any cost was already burning. When the night finally covered the city and silence reigned in the house, Rit got up from his bed. The moonlight was streaming through the small window and lay as a silver stripe on the floor. He slowly gathered his few belongings, an old shirt, a notebook, and the crumpled newspaper that had become a symbol of hope for him. His heart was beating fast, but his resolve was stronger than fear. He understood that running away from home would save money and give him a chance to earn more elsewhere. Quietly stepping so as not to wake his brothers and sisters, he approached his mother. She was awake and staring into the darkness as if waiting for this moment. Rit whispered to her about his decision to leave far away and return wealthy to heal her. Tears gleamed in her eyes, but instead of reproach she saw support and sad pride. She barely whispered that she believed in him and that he should not let poverty break his wings. These words became a blessing for him. He gently kissed her cold hand and said goodbye. Not looking back anymore, Rit stepped into the night. The air was cool and the streets empty. Ahead of him awaited the unknown, but along with it a chance to prove to the whole world that a boy with icy hands could ignite his own fate brighter than the sun. At dawn, when the sky was only beginning to lighten, Rit was already standing at the station among a crowd of strangers. The cold morning wind pierced his thin shirt, but he clenched his small bundle in his hand and stubbornly looked at the tracks stretching into infinity. He had no money for a ticket, so thinking about it was pointless. When a train approached the platform with a rumble, his heart pounded faster. He waited for the rush and quietly jumped into an open car. He spent the whole night without sleep in the corner on the wooden floor, holding his belongings to his chest. Exhaustion finally overcame him and he fell asleep to the rhythmic clatter of the wheels. The next day the train stopped in the hot expanses of Texas and Rit stepped onto the new land that smelled of dust and opportunity. The sun seemed hotter here than anywhere before, but along with the heat he felt a strange freedom. Nearby a few burly men were heading to work and without hesitation Rit followed them. He did not know exactly where he was going but knew that every step took him further from poverty and closer to his dream. The road led them to a large farm where workers were needed for hard labor. In front of the owner there were dozens of applicants and each tried to prove their strength. The slender Rit looked like the weakest among them, but his eyes burned with confidence. When his turn came he took the tool without hesitation and began working as if his life depended on it. In every movement there was persistence and the desire to get ahead, and this determination attracted the attention of the farmer, who watched the newcomer closely, not realizing that this was a boy who dreamed one day of owning lands far bigger than these endless fields. Work on the farm turned out to be exhausting and required more strength than Rit had ever used before. They had to install a long fence stretching across the hot fields, and each post had to be hammered into dry ground with incredible effort. The sun was merciless, and the palms quickly covered with calluses and cracks. Burly workers worked silently, occasionally wiping sweat and joking among themselves. The slender Rit barely kept up with their pace but did not allow himself to stop. When others sat down to rest, he remained by the unfinished section and stubbornly continued to dig and level the earth. His shoulders hurt and his breath became heavy, but he gritted his teeth, remembering the rich man's laughter from the car and his mother's cough. This mixture of anger and love drove him stronger than any command. One of the workers noticed his dedication and brought him a mug of cool water. Between them a brief conversation started, and Rit for the first time felt that here he was respected not for strength but for character. By evening the fence slowly grew, and although his hands trembled from fatigue, in his heart there was a feeling that this was only the first step toward something greater. He looked at the endless fields and imagined that one day he would not be a laborer but the one who gives orders and sets the rules, and this thought warmed him more than the blazing Texas sun. In the evening, when the workers returned to the dormitory, the air was filled with loud voices and laughter. Someone brought out a deck of cards and soon the room was filled with excitement and disputes. Coins clinked against the table and fatigue seemed to dissolve in cheap jokes. Rit sat aside on his narrow bed and opened his notebook where he recorded thoughts and observations. He carefully calculated how much time each stage of work took and how it could be reduced. Instead of cards and entertainment, he was attracted to numbers and plans. The friend who had brought him water earlier asked in surprise why he did not play with everyone else, but Rit only smiled and said he came here not to waste earnings but to multiply them. There was an unusual firmness in his words for a young man, and this confidence involuntarily commanded respect. Later, when most were already asleep, he quietly went outside and looked at the starry sky over the endless fields. Far away his home and sick mother remained, but instead of sadness he felt determination growing stronger. The next day he dared to approach the farm owner and ask how he had built his farm from scratch. The farmer looked at the boy attentively and instead of mocking invited him to sit down. Slowly and thoughtfully he began to reveal years of hard work, risk, and how important it is not only to work with hands but also to think faster than others. Every word struck Rit deeply, and at that moment a new idea flashed in his mind that could change not only his position on the farm but the whole direction of his future. The next morning Rit woke up earlier than everyone. The sun was just beginning to light the edges of the fields, and he felt a surge of energy and new determined mood. He decided to apply the idea that had been born yesterday in his mind. Instead of working alone, he suggested the workers unite and divide tasks into teams. 6 men split into 2 groups of 3, one measured and dug trenches, the second installed wooden posts, the third backfilled the earth and laid wires. The coordination worked almost immediately. The pace of work doubled, and even those who had previously complained about fatigue now worked with enthusiasm. Rit carefully watched and corrected movements, indicated where to speed up and where to help a teammate. His eyes shone with excitement and confidence. The farm owner, who usually did not interfere, stood aside and could not hide his smile. He noticed how the boy turned ordinary work into an effective team effort. By noon 6 men finished the work that usually took 3 days, and Rit felt the first true satisfaction from achievement and result. In the evening, when the farmer began distributing wages, he kept his word and gave the savings as a bonus to Rit. This was his first real income. He held the money in his hands and realized that every drop of sweat, every sacrifice, and every minute of thought brought him closer to his goal. Rit did not waste it. He immediately sent part home to buy medicine for his mother, and in his heart a new strength was born. A sense of control over his own life and understanding that even from the humblest beginnings one can build a great future. The next day Rit returned to the farm in the morning, feeling slight fatigue from the previous work, but in his heart burned new determination. He decided once again to optimize the process and try to do more than yesterday. He divided the workers and again monitored pace, while helping wherever he saw weak spots. The sun scorched the skin, hands were covered with calluses and scratches, but the boy felt that this was not an obstacle but a test of his strength and endurance. He thought of his mother waiting for medicine and felt a surge of energy. At lunch all sat together. Someone invited Rit to join the conversation and explain how he had organized the work. He quietly explained his team coordination method and others listened with interest to his advice. This was the first time the boy felt that people valued not only his physical strength but also his mind and ideas. Later, when work was over, Rit again made notes in his journal, analyzing what worked and what could be improved. He planned new strategies, new steps toward wealth. In the evening the farmer approached him and praised his leadership and initiative. It was a small but important victory. Rit felt that his diligence and ingenuity were beginning to pay off, and for the first time he realized that he could control his own destiny, that every day of labor brought him closer to the life he dreamed of, a life where he would never again earn mere pennies under someone else's orders. A few days later, Rit felt more confident on the farm. His methods of work were becoming increasingly refined. He carefully observed every move of the workers and corrected them in time, guided them, taught them. Gradually, everyone began to follow his style, and work became not only faster but more enjoyable. Even those who previously complained about fatigue or difficulty now worked with enthusiasm and pleasure. Rit noticed that with each day his authority grew, but he remained modest and silent, never boasting about achievements. He only quietly recorded all noticeable changes in his journal. One evening after work, he sent part of his earnings home, buying medicine for his mother. The feeling that he could really help his family gave him strength. The sun was blazing, hands were sore, legs stiff with fatigue, but every day was a step toward his dream, and nights were a time for thoughts and new ideas that he would surely bring to life. Each day on the farm, Rit became more noticeable. His work and organizational methods gained more followers among the workers. He was no longer just doing tasks but managing the process, guiding, correcting, teaching. The work went much faster. His eyes shone with determination, and his mind generated new ideas. He dreamed not just of money, but of creating his own business that would change his family's life. After work, he often stayed late, drawing plans in his journal, recording every detail. What worked well, what could be improved, how to distribute people and resources. The farmer noticed these efforts and began to consult Rit on future projects. The boy listened carefully and learned how to think strategically, how not just to work but to lead. Even after exhausting work, he did not rest in vain. In the evening, he recorded notes, planned, dreamed of the future, which included wealth, freedom, and the ability to help his family, sending part of his earned money to his mother for medicine. He felt that his actions had real impact, and now even the greatest difficulties seemed only tests to overcome, for in his heart burned a flame of desire to rise above all that once limited him. In the following weeks on the farm became a period of intense work and new discoveries for Rit. He improved his method of organizing work every day, observed the workers, recorded in his journal everything he could use to improve the process. His attentiveness and persistence clearly distinguished him from others. Even those who previously doubted his abilities began to seek his advice. Rit helped everyone and at the same time learned himself. He noticed that small changes brought big results, that one could work not only with hands but with mind. The farmer watched him with respect and from time to time shared his mistakes and successes. These conversations inspired Rit and made him dream of his own business. After work, the boy again sent part of his earnings home, buying medicine for his mother. The feeling that he could help his family gave him strength. The sun burned, hands hurt, legs ached, but the pain now seemed a sign that he was moving in the right direction, and in his heart grew an unshakable fire, the desire to rise above all that had once limited him, and no one could stop his pursuit of success and wealth. The days on the farm became more and more intense for Rit. He got used to exhausting work under the blazing sun, to heavy posts that required strength, and to wires stretching across the fields. But each day gave him new lessons, each mistake a chance to become better. He no longer just performed tasks but organized the work so that everything went faster, distributed people, gave advice, corrected mistakes. Gradually, all began to follow his example. The work became more efficient, and the results exceeded expectations. Rit continued to keep his journal, recording all ideas and improvements. He planned new methods and dreamed of future businesses and wealth, which would allow him to help his family, sending part of his earnings home for medicine. He looked at his sick mother and felt pride that his work mattered. Even when the sun scorched his head, hands were covered in calluses, and legs refused to obey, he did not give up, for every drop of sweat was a step toward his dream. Nights he spent reviewing notes, analyzing work, planning new strategies. New ideas about how to earn more, organize people better, increase productivity were born in his mind, and his heart filled with determination and desire to become rich, so that he would never again feel humiliation from poverty, to have the power to help his family, to change his life and rise above all that once limited him. Over time, Rit felt that his role on the farm was becoming increasingly important. He was no longer just a newcomer performing tasks. Now he planned work, distributed assignments, monitored pace and quality. His colleagues began to perceive him as a leader, listened to advice, and followed the methods he invented. Work became an efficient team effort rather than chaotic struggle with the heavy field. He noticed efficiency increasing, which gave him confidence. Rit continued to keep his journal, recording all observations and improvements. He planned how to do more in less time, thought about future enterprises and wealth to help his family, sending part of earnings home for medicine. He looked at his sick mother and felt proud that his work had meaning. Even when the sun was blazing, hands covered in calluses, legs aching, he did not give up, for every drop of sweat was a step toward his dream. Nights he spent reviewing notes, analyzing work, and planning new strategies. His mind worked tirelessly. New ideas about how to earn more, organize people better, and improve productivity were born, and his heart filled with determination and desire to become rich. so that no one would ever look down on him again. After a few weeks, Rit felt that his efforts were beginning to yield real results. He was no longer just working on the farm, he almost organized it, directed people, distributed tasks, gave advice where to speed up and where to focus on precision. His colleagues began to listen and follow his example. Work became more efficient, results exceeded expectations. The farmer noticed this and consulted Rit more and more about future plans. The boy listened attentively and memorized every detail. Knowing that every lesson could be useful when he created his own business, every day he sent part of his earnings home, buying medicine for his mother and feeling how his work saved his loved ones. His hands and shoulders ached, legs stiff from fatigue, but pain now seemed a sign of strength and the desire to achieve the goal. Evenings Rit made notes in his journal, thought about how to accelerate work even more, how to improve organization, how to develop his own business in the future. He dreamed of the day when he would rise above poverty, above the world where wealth determined respect, when no one would look down on him again, and his family would live without fear and need. His heart filled with determination and thirst for success, which grew stronger and unstoppable each day, like an invisible engine driving him toward a great future. Finally, the day came when Rit felt he had taken the first real step toward his great goal. His work, mind, and perseverance brought not only respect on the farm but also the first real capital, earned for efficient organization and bonuses from the farmer. The boy felt pride because he sent part of the money home for his mother's medicine, and now she could breathe a little easier. And Rit's heart filled with a sense of strength and control over his own destiny. He knew this was only the beginning, but now he had faith that any difficulty was a test that could be overcome, that through intelligence, diligence, and ingenuity he could rise above.